Hi, and welcome to Rontime. Today is the 16th of May in 2014, and according to the last message I heard, I'm probably going to be a grandfather for the second time today. My son Blair and my daughter-in-law Daphne will be delivering their second child in Brooklyn, New York, where they live and work. And I'd really like to congratulate Daphne on her work on the first 48 hours as editor. She's been doing a fantastic job, and I deeply commend her skills and her stick-to-itiveness. She worked really hard on the editing that she had to take over from an apparent disaster. So, hopefully, my second granddaughter, who is expected probably sometime later this evening, will not be as much of a challenge as producing television. But anyway, the other things that are going on, we celebrated Sinko de Mayo, which was the day that Queen Isabella sent these enormous custom urns, ceramic urns of condiments from Europe to Maximilian, who was the Emperor of Mexico at the time, under the Habsburg family. Interesting time in Mexican history. And one of the boats carrying these condiments for his birthday party crashed off the coast of Cuba in a small hurricane, and that began the tradition of Cinco de Mayo, because some of the jars were condiments. Okay. Now, on a serious note, somewhere off the coast of Haiti, it is believed that they have finally found the third boat of Columbus, which was named the Santa Maria. And the Santa Maria was the only one not to return from its voyage to the New World. And apparently, a father and son diver team believe that they have finally identified cannon as well as ballast from the correct period, from the correct port and harbor, and from the correct bronze cannon maker, that would indicate that the one single cannon of the Santa Maria on the fantail has been discovered by divers. So, interestingly enough, let's fast forward a while, and there's a flying boat commissioned by Mussolini, the dictator of Italy, and he sends a group of flying boats of the largest capacity and the fastest speed to the Chicago World's Fair to demonstrate the viability of the fascist Italian economy producing the world's fastest seaplanes. Well, the seaplanes go from the Chicago World's Fair, crossing America, and they stop at what at the time is the largest man-made dammed lake in the United States, called Roosevelt Lake, named after a president, Teddy. And interestingly enough, they land on the lake. They have a commemorative ceremony with speeches and blah, blah, blah. And a kid rowing a rowboat throws a cigarette onto the lake, and he lights the aviation gas, which is floating because the tanks leak a little from expansion in the heat of the Arizona desert on the largest man-made lake in the United States of America. The plane burns and sinks into Roosevelt Lake. the Santa Maria. So in 2 cases, the Santa Maria has been sent to America on a mission of goodwill, exploration, and bravado. I mean, after all, these were explorers doing something for the first time ever in history. And both of the Santa Marias are at the bottom of a body of water somewhere. And they're not really designed for that purpose. So, kind of an interesting tie in history across quite a bit of time. Speaking of time, you're watching Rontime. And if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to call the number that you see at the bottom of your screen, and I would be glad to answer them. Quite frequently when I answer questions, I do a little preparation in advance, which is that I actually load up and then I floss. Because if you don't floss, you will develop rigid thinking because you get calculus of the brain, and flossing actually loosens that up. Flossing actually reduces heart disease significantly as well, because if you floss, you're going to reduce the amount of, what do they call it, microbiology that coexists in your system that is harmful to your gums and produces diseases like gingivitis. And if you don't floss with mental floss, then what you develop is rigid thinking and calculus of the mind. And when calculus of the mind sets in, you begin to think in very rigid, structured, equational type of thoughts only. Frequently, then you will end up voting Republican, turning conservative, and as we said in the 60s, selling out. So, ever since the 60s, those of us who chose not to sell out, many of us now comprise a large portion of the population of America called the cannabis criminals. That's right, folks. Every 37 seconds, somewhere in America, a human being is arrested for cannabis, a non-narcotic class 1 controlled substance, which you have been lied to by your own self-supporting federal government ever since the Tax Act of 1937 and the classification of Class 1 in the 70s under the Reagan administration. And I would like to remind you that Nancy Reagan was not only responsible for a program called Just Say No, which of course ignored all of the scientific evidence about cannabis and cannabinoid oils and the process of curing cancer in a naturopathic methodology. No, she took a moralistic stance that said no drugs, none. All drugs are bad, and this one is the worst. Hence the Class 1 classification. So let's fast forward a few years to the for-profit prison system economy of the current America, where 4 out of 5 prisoners in the world are incarcerated in American jails, and where 4 out of 5 of those prisoners are persons of color, then you have a system of justice that was transferred to the Treasury Department, quite by mistake, under the moral belief that America needed saving from this killer drug, marijuana. even though studies proved that cannabinoid oils will kill cancer in the human body without collateral damage and without any evidence of the damage caused by radiation therapy or chemotherapy, which are supported by the American Medical Association, which continues to refuse to release accurate medical studies done in the United States of America at taxpayer expense, which you and I, including all the cannabinoid criminals, paid for. Trillions of dollars. When you add up all the interception costs of the Coast Guard, the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Marines, protecting the coasts of America from that dangerous weed, that noxious killer, cannabis. Trillions of your dollars have been taken from your pocket, probably most unwillingly. There are already 2 states where it's legal: recreational, medical, pharmaceutical. 2 out of 50. And yet the federal government continues to spend billions of dollars every month attempting to stop any flow or traffic of this narcotic drug, the most dangerous drug on earth, according to a white supremacist Harry Anslinger, who got it judged under the tax code as a class 1 narcotic. So if you're caught with it, they can take everything you own because they can claim that was purchased with the proceeds of selling and producing marijuana. They can give you a jail sentence for simple possession because under mandatory sentencing laws and 3 strikes, there are actually American citizens spending life sentences for nothing more than possession of cannabis. And you and I got to pay for that every time we paid taxes to the federal government, the largest consumer, by the way, of fossil fuels on earth. So if you want to see how the world really works, just study how Congress gives subsidies to the most profitable businesses in the history of human endeavor. The oil companies made record profits last year, and you paid them federal subsidies to operate in a profitable manner. And the largest consumer is the federal government of the United States. When you add up all the aircraft carriers in the Navy and all the vehicles in the Army and everything that belongs to the NSA and everything that belongs to the CIA and everything that belongs to the black government that they won't talk about because it's a secret budget with no numbers. By the time you add it all up, the truth does not stand a chance. Not a tinker's dam in hell. Money runs the United States of America. And last year alone, the Koch brothers spent $100 million of their own money influencing your local elections for school boards, for state representatives, for senators and representatives to the United States Congress. It's believed that they gave a total of $400 million in advertising. So, does your voice matter? Does my voice matter? Well, right now it matters because I'm on tape and you're here. So let's be present. If we were present, we would understand that the current system is not sustainable because it relies upon the parasitic profiting from humanity's suffering. And every 20 seconds, somewhere on the earth that you live on, that I share with you, every 20 seconds, a human being dies for lack of two things: water and adequate sanitation. So that's 3 every minute. And my television show tonight is 25 minutes long. Times 3, that's 75 human beings who died, who left their bodies off this earth because they didn't have access to adequate sanitation or clean water. And during the same period of time, your federal government and mine, every 37 seconds, arrested an American citizen for possession of cannabis. So, if you do the math and you follow the money, the for-profit prison system in America represents the largest industrial scale of slavery that we know of. Now, they didn't keep really accurate records when they were building the pyramids, okay? They didn't mark down all the people that died of dehydration or heat prostration or starvation. But I must say, at least the Egyptians were smart enough to brew a very strong and powerful beer that gave almost all the nutrient quality required to the workers who were building the pyramids. Now, in contrast, if you're incarcerated in an American jail and you're one of those 4 out of 5 who is a person of color, you're going to be forced to work 8 hours a day during your incarceration, and the Koch brothers will be paying you 20 cents an hour. 14 cents of that will go to your room and board. So, 6 cents of that will go to your room and board, 40%. So the other 14 cents is your hourly wage for 8 hours a day, and mandatory sentencing in many, many cases for possession of cannabis is 6 months. With a fine, by the way, if you're caught in your vehicle in the city of Tucson with cannabis of $1,450, even if it's a 1/2 gram bag that costs $10. So, do you think the American justice system is operational? Do you think it has an effectiveness that is going to be generational, that your kids want to continue the policies that are currently in place? As a matter of fact, do you want to continue the policies that are currently in place where the federal government of the United States lies to you, lies to all treaty countries under the United Nations who enacted the same cannabis legislation that we forced on the young and early United Nations when it was called the League of Nations? So, interestingly enough, 2 states in America and a number of countries around the world have completely and totally legalized recreational, medical, and institutional use of cannabis. As a matter of fact, if you study Holland as an example, they have reduced the number of jail cells since 1970s, when we forced them to sign a treaty banning cannabis in order to be a member of NATO and our ally. Since that time, in spite of the trillions of dollars that were spent by the federal government to attempt to control the flow of this drug, the demand exceeds supply. And as a matter of fact, let me correct that. The demand today is no greater per capita than it was in the 70s, when the Reagans lied to the Congress and created the Just Say No program that had a zero tolerance for cannabis, even though they knew nothing factual about its medical capabilities. It cures cancer, and it cures specifically breast cancer. So how many women have had to die or suffer chemotherapy or suffer radiation therapy and mastectomies when there is an organic treatment that is non-invasive? It doesn't hurt any other part of the woman's body. It cures the cancer, and it only attacks cancer cells. But the Drug Enforcement Administration of the United States continues to lie to you through their spokespersons, through their administration, and through the Attorney General of the United States, who has refused to push forward a reclassification demand in the Supreme Court to actually match the facts on the ground. So your money and your belief in democracy and your contributions to your elected officials at every single level has continued to support a lie, an absolute falsification by a white supremacist who said approximately 100,000 marijuana users in the United States are comprised mostly of Negroes, entertainers, jazz musicians, and other Puerto Ricans and other minorities. These minorities use cannabis and their evil music, jazz and swing, to convince normal white women to have sexual relations with black men, musicians, Puerto Ricans, and others. Look it up. It's the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, and it's the testimony before Congress sworn by Harry Anslinger to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So, if you believe that caca, then you probably believe everything that Edward Snowden released is fabrication. Well, the facts are otherwise, folks. And here on Rontime, my job is to make sure that you understand the facts and that you understand your power to take these facts to task. There is an action required. You and I have to admit that the cannabis criminals in America represent a powerful political force that is underused and underdeveloped.